endlessly modifiable lockpicking set. So many different ways to use this. I prefer using maybe a 5-6 ounce leather. If you go too thick, it gets hard getting all your snaps and stuff to set. So like in this situation, mine were real short, so I just fastened the snap underneath that first layer. I didn't go through both. However, you can go through both if you want. I prefer to have mine just go underneath that little jobber, but you can go over the top like this one is, and they stay in place. As you know, I like to make things incredibly customizable. All kinds of different things you could do, ways you could wear it. You can see it's displayed one way there. You could have them just hanging and have just this one on your belt. You could have them all just on top or all underneath. Skip this part altogether. Just put your rivets there. You could go with flat rivets if you want it to be real flat. I kind of like having those crossed right there. Same with this side. Go underneath or have that on top holding them. Then if you're skipping this part altogether, you just don't need to do those 2 snaps. You have your extra tools in here. And the pick set that I bought online came with all this stuff. So if you just follow that link, I got it on Amazon. I believe I paid $15 for it. The only thing I would say is if you're going with this thicker stuff and having all these extra parts on, you might want to go a little bit thicker with your square D-ring. Not necessary. I like it thinner anyways. Even if it gets thick in there, it'll just kind of compact the edges a little bit. But you can wear it so many different ways, both in front, separately. You could have it where that's attached down there, hinges open, have them hanging like that. Comes in handy with these little snaps, and you can just do a rivet there if you don't want those snaps. I will say, when you grab this hardware, these little clips, I like them to be as narrow this way as possible, because when they're clipped on that, they're going to be flipped like that. And I just like them not catching on stuff. Not too relevant. But I made all of these D-rings and the clips and everything 5/8 of an inch. So you can just go out and grab all that same size. You can also hang a couple skeleton keys from right here if you want. It's kind of cool hanging from your belt. For this project, I like to use like a 5-6 ounce leather. I think this is a 6-7. I wouldn't go any more than 7. It'll start to get a little too thick. I think ideally 5 ounce, maybe a 6. So I got a 6 ounce. I'm going to use this throughout the entire pattern. However, you could do a couple of the parts a little bit thinner, like the things around the keys and stuff. But I like to do projects where you can just get one hide and that thickness will be great throughout. I dyed and sealed this already, and what I did, you can see there's kind of a little pattern to this. I just used one of these natural sponges, dipped it in some dye, and blotted it on here. Not worrying about even going even, just kind of going sporadically. And I did a second coat where I just kind of filled in where it was really light. It's kind of a nice pattern to it. And then the back, I just went with a red. Did 2 coats of that. So I'll kind of have a nice little two-tone, cool pattern on the front. You're going to print your pattern out. Give it a test page on that first one and make sure you got the sizing correct. You're going to cut the patterns out, but just outside of the line. That way we can tape them down and really be able to cut the leather right on that line as we're cutting the parts out. It makes it a little easier to get it nice and accurate. I like to use a stitching chisel for this. The only thing to keep in mind is when you're going around corners, you'll be straight here, but as soon as you get to that corner, you want to turn your stitching chisel so that it follows that corner. So you'll notice sometimes with tape or even glue adhesives, they can build up and stick up in there, especially with the real small hole punches. So I figured out a good mix, and I'll have this available in my shop. I had a few people interested in it. And I'll just give it a couple taps so it just keeps it nice and slick in there so you're not fighting it. There's no resistance in there. Once you get all the holes punched, we can start cutting this out. However, these internal corners can be a bit difficult, so I like to use a hole punch that's closest to that radius. I could probably go one bigger even if I had it, but for these external corners, I like to make a couple passes. Just start taking it a little bit at a time. Sometimes with just a small radius, if you're going through something thicker, I won't go through all the way the first pass. Just make sure I hit that line real well. And do a couple passes. Comes out a little cleaner. You can always just come out straight and then use an end punch as well. Another way, when you're getting close to the corners, if it's real hard, you don't want to slip and cut into the part, you can tip your knife up real tall and push this into the blade a little and then rock it down and just keep rocking if you need to do just a little bit of a cut. So this piece will snap across here once we get all those other rivets and stuff on there. But I like to put that part of the snap on that side and do the other part on this side. Even though that's flat, I still like to use something under there because this can give a little bit distorting the back of that piece. This one, I'll put the back of the snaps through those end holes. And then this one, it'll be that same back of the snap, but it'll be reversed. You want that to go through the other side. Whenever I'm snapping, whenever I'm putting that part of a snap on where it splays the inside of that tube out, I'll grab something real small if it's a bigger snap. This is as small as I have. And I'll kind of roll it around just to try to splay that out first before just hammering it down. Seems to set just a little bit nicer. Hold that snap down while we're tapping this. You want to go overboard, but you want to go until this doesn't move around nice and snug. So that's the snaps for that. And then this one goes across here. And you can see sometimes with these little snaps, you can go just a little bit bigger because the inside of that snap, if you can see it, that part actually goes down a little bit further than the outskirts. So when you put this on here, it will lay flatter when the inside section of that snap goes into that larger hole. Not necessary, but sometimes I do that. Same thing as before. Try to splay that out just a little bit first. Okay, I actually put this on wrong, so I had to pop those out, flip it around, put it on the right way. It happens. And when you're looking at this, just make sure those two snaps align with the holes on that. That, you see it's the same thing, just snaps on. So now we're going to sew around. This one has a little bit more, so however you want to do it, come around, hit those separately, tie knots. However, I like to wax my thread just a little bit, and depending on your leather, if it has a little bit of oil in it, it might not be a huge deal, but when you bend these, just to make sure it doesn't split and whatnot, this leather's pretty dry. So I'm going to take just a little bit of water and wet those down, let it soak in so I can get them to bend easier. And I can wait on these, but I'll have to do these two right away because as I'm coming around, we'll sew those down. When you start, pick a hole that you know will match up, like where those come together there. That way we know we're not going to miss a hole. When you get to these tabs, make sure they're folded with that D-ring in there. You're going to sew through all 3 layers. Get them to snap. Basically, this other side, you'll be doing the same thing. The only main difference is instead of being able to unsnap the bottom D-ring, this one will have them fastened just like the top. To make these 2 clips, your belt can slide through. There's going to be 3 different sizes too, so depending on how wide your belt's going to be. I like to use clips that are kind of narrow. If they're real big, they kind of stick out a little when it's clipped on there. So I like to use something a little bit more narrow. And you may need to moisten this a little bit to get it to bend well. We'll just go across that. I like to go across the edge too, just really reinforce it. Sew that together, get your 2 clips done. So we have some ball end studs here. You can go with a pretty small one. I usually go kind of with a medium, punch the appropriate size hole. And what's nice is if you have this little variety pack, over time if that loosens up, you can replace them with a bigger one. But these are the ones I like to use. And before we get this ready, you're going to want to order a set of these with the plastic handles, the little lock picks. You can use any one you want and cut them off or however you want to do it. I like these plastic ones because it's pretty easy just to pop that off and use that insert. And I'll just heat up the end here. It's just a matter of heating this plastic up enough so it lets go of that metal. The metal only goes down in there just a little bit. That actually got hotter than I needed it to be, but you get the gist of it. Clean that off. It could be hot, so be careful. What I like to do with these now is they're pretty smooth and they'll hold in there just fine if you glue them like we show. If you plan on using these, you're going to want to bend these little ends a little bit, and we'll tap it into that leather just so it holds real well. We'll just bend each side of this down just a little bit. Like so. That way we can tap it down in there, glue them on. And we'll do that to this flat side. Get it nice and straight. Just make sure you don't cover up any of the stitching holes. Just give it some taps. Try to get it kind of flush. So that way, even already with no glue. So you can see now even already with no glue, that's holding on there pretty good. So we'll get some glue on there. First we're going to need to get this. What I like to do, just to make sure these threads don't undo, you can get ones where it's just like a rivet that you pound in there. With these screw ones, I'll use a little bit of Loctite. If I had the red, I'd probably just use that, but the blue is more of a temporary Loctite, and the red one's more of a permanent. Screw it on as tight as you can. Try to get that as flush as possible. If you have a pair of pliers that won't mar the surface, you can use those. I have a little piece of rubber that grips them real well, so I'll just wrap that around there to hold on to it. And we're going to glue those two sides together. You don't want to go overboard because you don't want the glue seeping into those stitches. I'll just give it a couple minutes so that can kind of soak in a little bit and tack up. Make sure it's locked in there. Once I get this part straight, just clip them and let that glue dry. And I'll clip back on the edge because it'll want to squeeze around that part. I want the edges to close in. Just let that dry. I like to go around the edge usually twice. When I get to the end, I'll just go around and then through the center, and we'll tie those two ends together. I'll put a little glue in there, trim those, and stuff those ends in. This one will go the same as the other one. You'll just have a couple extra stitch lines. The only difference is the bottom ones aren't snapped. So the bottom ones, you'll actually sew those D-rings onto. That way the other one can unsnap, and for all that customization. You will need to make sure that the top here, because those couple extra pressure keys or whatever, they're going to go in there, and you don't want this upside down. So the standard D-rings you want to just make sure are on top. And then these ones will go on the bottom. This one, I don't put anything. I just we'll put a keychain or something around there to hang a couple skeleton keys or something. But you may need to moisten those to get that to fold. So I'll just continue around, get all those tabs sewn on there. However you want to come through and hit these is just fine. I just like to tie knots and hide it underneath somewhere so I don't have to backstitch quite as much. I think it looks a little nicer, but really however you want to do it. So I'll show you something I like to do. If I just got a few stitches kicking off the main line here, I could tie a knot, do that separate, but what I like to do is just grab one needle, go down and back. If you're careful, you can get it to fall on the right side of the thread even. That side was done this way. point, what I'll do is look at which side I want it to fall on. I want it to go on the top here. So as long as you just focus on getting it on the side of that thread, take a look at the back and make sure it's falling on that side. If it looks like it goes through it, just try again. It may take 1 or 2 tries. As long as you take a look at that. It'll look just fine. You're saving yourself a lot of trouble backstitching or tying more knots. Wouldn't even be able to tell the difference. Now I can just finish that line of stitches and be done with this part. You can see which way that cut goes. If you peel from that side, they pop out easier. Obviously with some use, that'll help. You got this extra little pocket for the extra tools. But you can have this hanging from your belt loops, both facing this way, so you can unattach one and use it. These have snaps on the back of that one, so you can come on and off of here. Have it hang like that. Close it up, have it go through the clips. You can see it squeezes just a little bit. You can do the smaller ones. If I was to add this on there, it's even a little bit more so. Kind of squeezing. But either way, I prefer those so I can go whichever way I want in time. And all these work. I'll put links in the description where I bought those little tools. I think I got mine for 15 bucks. And it came with these extra ones and all those extra things. But I think I will go like that. You can straighten them out, and once it forms, it will really hold those where you want them. Even do it like that. I just really like a lot of options. So if you figure out something else to do with these, like putting a couple keys through there or something, and this is the other thing you can do, whether you have these attached together or not, grab a couple skeleton keys.